It was characteristic. Hell. Both feet frozen. Need 'em myself. Prentice. To make matters worse, most of the Toyats were in the back country on the flanks of a caribou herd, and Jees was with them. Removing to a distance seemed to bring her closer than ever, and Neil Bonner found himself picturing her day by day, in camp and on trail. It is not good to be alone. Often he went out of the quiet store, bareheaded and frantic, and shook his fist at the blink of day that came over the southern skyline. And on cold, still nights he left his bed and stumbled into the frost, where he assaulted the silence at the top of his lungs that there was some tangible, sentient thing that he might arouse, or he shouted at the sleeping dogs till they howled and howled again. One shaggy brute he brought into the post, playing that it was the new man set by Prentice. He strove to make it sleep decently under the blankets at night, and to sit at table and eat as a man should. But the beast, mere domesticated wolf that it was, rebelled and sought out dark corners and snarled and bit him in the leg, and finally was beaten and driven forth. Then the trick of personification seized upon Neil Bonner and mastered him. All the forces of his environment metamorphosed into living, breathing entities and came to live with him. He recreated the primitive pantheon, reared an altar to the sun and burned candle fat and bacon grease thereon, and in the unfenced yard by the long-legged cache made a frost devil, which he was wont to make faces at and mock when the mercury oozed down into the bulb. All this in play, of course. He said to himself that it was in play, and repeated it over and over to make sure, unaware that madness is ever prone to express itself in make-believe and play. One midwinter day, Father Champreau, a Jesuit missionary, pulled into 20 Mile. Bonner fell upon him and dragged him into the post and clung to him and wept until the priest wept with him from sheer compassion. Then Bonner became madly hilarious and made lavish entertainment, swearing valiantly that his guest should not depart. But Father Champreau was pressing to salt water on urgent business for his order, and pulled out next morning, with Bonner's blood threatened on his head. And the threat was in a fair way towards realization when the Toyats returned from their long hunt to the winter camp. They had many furs, and there was much trading and stir at 20 Mile. Also, Jees came to buy beads and scarlet cloths and things, and Bonner began to find himself again. He fought for a week against her. Then the end came one night when she rose to leave. She had not forgotten her repulse, and the pride that drove Spike O'Brien on to complete the Northwest Passage by land was her pride. "I go now," she said. "Good night, Neil." But he came up behind her. "Nay, it is not well," he said. And as she turned her face toward him with a sudden joyful flash, he bent forward slowly and gravely, as it were a sacred thing, and kissed her on the lips. The Toyats had never taught her the meaning of a kiss upon the lips, but she understood and was glad. With the coming of Jees at once things brightened up. She was regal in her happiness, a source of unending delight. The elemental workings of her mind and her naive little ways made an immense sum of pleasurable surprise to the over-civilized man that had stooped to catch her up. Not alone was she solace to his loneliness, but her primitiveness rejuvenated his jaded mind. It was as though, after long wandering, he had returned to pillow his head in the lap of Mother Earth. In short, in Jees he found the youth of the world, the youth and the strength and the joy. And to fill the full round of his need, and that they might not see overmuch of each other, there arrived at 20 Mile one Sandy McPherson, as companionable a man as ever whistled along the trail or raised a ballad by a campfire. A Jesuit priest had run into his camp a couple of 100 miles up the Yukon in the nick of time to say a last word over the body of Sandy's partner. And on departing the priest had said, "My son, you will be lonely now." And Sandy had bowed his head brokenly. "At 20 Mile," the priest added, "there is a lonely man. You have need of each other, my son." So it was that Sandy became a welcome third at the post, brother to the man and woman that resided there. He took Bonner moose hunting and wolf trapping, and in return, Bonner resurrected a battered and way-worn volume and made him friends with Shakespeare, till Sandy declaimed iambic pentameters to his sled dog whenever they waxed mutinous. And of the long evenings they played cribbage and talked and disagreed about the universe, while Jees rocked matronly in an easy chair and darned their moccasins and socks. Spring came. The sun shot up out of the south. The land exchanged its austere robes for the garb of a smiling wanton. Everywhere light laughed and life invited. The days stretched out their balmy length, and nights passed from blinks of darkness to no darkness at all. The river bared its bosom, and snorting steamboats challenged the wilderness. There were stir and bustle, new faces, and fresh facts. An assistant arrived at 20 miles, and Sandy McPherson wandered off with a bunch of prospectors to invade the Koyukuk country. And there were newspapers and magazines and letters for Neil Bonner. And Jees looked in worriment, for she knew his kindred talked with him across the world. Without much shock, it came to him that his father was dead. There was a sweet letter of forgiveness dictated in his last hours. There were official letters from the company graciously ordering him to turn the post over to the assistant and permitting him to depart at his earliest pleasure. A long legal affair from the lawyers informed him of interminable lists of stocks and bonds, real estates, rents, and chattels that were his by his father's will. And a dainty bit of stationery, sealed and monogrammed, implored Neil's return to his heartbroken and loving mother. Neil Bonner did some swift thinking, and when the Yukon Belle coughed into the bank on her way down to Bering Sea, he departed. Departed with the ancient lie of quick return young and blithe on his lips. "I'll come back, dear Jees, before the first snow flies," he promised her, between the last kisses at the gangplank. And not only did he promise, but like the majority of men under the same circumstances, he really meant it. To John Thompson, the new agent, he gave orders for the extension of unlimited credit to his wife, Jees. Also, with his last look from the deck of the Yukon Belle, he saw a dozen men at work rearing the logs that were to make the most comfortable house along 1,000 miles of riverfront, the house of Jees, and likewise the house of Neil Bonner, ere the first flurry of snow. For he fully and fondly meant to come back. Jees was dear to him, and further, a golden future awaited the north. With his father's money, he intended to verify that future. An ambitious dream allured him. With his 4 years of experience, and aided by this friendly cooperation of the P.C. Company, he would return to become the Rhodes of Alaska. And he would return, fast as steam could drive, as soon as he had put into shapes the affairs of his father, whom he had never known, and comforted his mother, whom he had forgotten. There was much ado when Neil Bonner came back from the Arctic. The fires were lighted and the flesh pots slung, and he took it of all and called it good. Not only was he bronzed and creased, but he was a new man under his skin, with a grip on things and a seriousness and control. His own companions were amazed when he declined to hit up the pace in the good old way, while his father's cronies rubbed their hands gleefully, and became an authority upon the reclamation of wayward and idle youth. For 4 years Neil Bonner's mind had lain fallow. Little that was new had been added to it, but it had undergone a process of selection. It had, so to say, been purged of the trivial and superfluous. He had lived quick years down in the world, and up in the wilds time had been given to him to organize the confused mass of his experiences. His superficial standards had been flung to the winds, and new standards erected on deeper and broader generalizations. Concerning civilization, he had gone away with one set of values, had returned with another set of values. Aided also by the earth smells in his nostrils and the earth sights in his eyes, he laid hold of the inner significance of civilization, beholding with clear vision its futilities and powers. It was a simple little philosophy he evolved. Clean living was the way to grace. Duty performed was sanctification. One must live clean and do his duty in order that he might work. Work was salvation. And to work towards life abundant and more abundant was to be in line with the scheme of things and the will of God. Primarily, he was of the city, and his fresh earth grip and virile conception of humanity gave him a finer sense of civilization and endeared civilization to him. Day by day, the people of the city clung closer to him, and the world loomed more colossal. And, day by day, Alaska grew more remote and less real. And then he met Kitty Sharon, a woman of his own flesh and blood and kind, a woman who put her hand into his hand and drew him to her, till he forgot the day and hour and the time of the year the first snow flies on the Yukon. End of the story of Jees.